I've heard a gentleman should always carry protection. Yeah, that was pretty bad. I think I'm going to cut it out. Alright, I wanted to do a quick series of reviews of a couple of bucklers I've picked up since this one from Get Dressed for Battle. I still really like it. It's quite handy, and I'll compare it to the other ones I picked up. Why did I pick up some other ones? Well, in the video that I did a while back on this buckler, this is a 9-inch buckler in terms of diameter, and I just didn't feel safe enough, so I picked up some larger ones. So I was going to start today with this one. Now this one is made by Armory Replicas, so it's another company out of India. Same kind of gauge steel, but in many ways very different, and of course bigger. This is an 11-inch. Well, on the Amazon page, it's a little contradictory. Places they said it was 12, other places they said it was 11. It's 11, but it's actually quite a nice size. Before I get into it, a couple of things. One, in previous reviews, people have been, looking at my original review on this Kingston Arms Type 14, and I was pretty hard on it, but I've, mentioned I've done some things to it since in terms of, well, greatly improved the edge. It is a fantastic piece of steel. And in my recent wrapping video, I did add a new wrap on it. And now that I've been actually practicing arming sword and buckler more properly, yeah, this sword is pretty awesome. Compared to my other arming swords, this one is effortlessly light. So when I'm training with it, it's quick. It's also short enough that I can kind of get away with a little practice inside if I'm careful. But yeah, I do not regret buying this sword, and I've put it to a whole lot of use since that original video. But let's get on with some, well, comparative specs, what I like and maybe don't like so much about this one compared to my original 9-inch. You're not going to see me moving around a lot today because I tweaked my knee just a little bit this week. Don't worry, it's not bad. I was experimenting with a slightly different toe orientation in my lunges, which felt great at the time, but not so much a few days later. And I don't know if it was the weird torque on my old knees or, well, I was going pretty quick, so it might have been impact. But it's not bad. Nothing's torn as far as I can tell. I'm just limping a little. But it gives me a good excuse to focus on my upper body, give my lower body a break. And that's a good time to talk about bucklers because, yeah, upper body workout. Which gets us to specs. It's not just about the diameter. Let's talk about, well, mass. This is supposed to be 14 gauge, and this is supposed to be 18 gauge. And I think one of them is a typo because this one does not feel thinner than this one. It actually feels beefier. And they're both perfectly solid enough to do the job. We'll talk about, well, what that job might be in a second, how I feel about that. But yeah, 1 pound 12 ounces, 2 pounds 12 ounces, a whole pound heavier for this one. And that puts it in the weight class of some of the swords that I train with easily. Now, when it comes to managing that weight with a sword versus a buckler, you're certainly with the buckler not dealing with that leverage issue of having that, stretched out across a blade away from your hand. But you're definitely feeling it in the shoulders, supporting this thing, especially at extension for extended periods of time. So yeah, it's a special kind of workout. Also, rotating this, which we'll talk about in a second, is a special kind of workout on the grip and the wrist. So let's talk about construction before we get back to the back sides of these things. This is a one-piece construction. It's just kind of stamped and shaped with the edge rolled over. And this is 2 pieces. So you've got the boss riveted onto the body, like it would be if the body was made out of wood or wooden leather or something like that. Now, I don't know what the weight differential would be if this was a combination of metal and wood and leather. I don't have one of those yet. But yeah, this is a pretty solid build. Also, you'll notice this one's got, a slope to the body, and this one's got a flat body. Now, one of my concerns with this one, besides the diameter, was that sloping and those rounded edges. And my fear was if I was trying to stop an incoming thrust would it simply deflect off and into me? Well, here's a knife project I've never finished. This is a piece of tool steel, and yeah, it is sharp. And with this being mild steel, it'll bite in a little bit. Get a little bit of binding in the bind, but when it goes to deflect, even though this edge is fairly rounded, it'll catch a bit. That makes me feel better. What about this one? Well, it's certainly hitting it flatter, but that has, well, shall we say, a much more right-angled edge on the roll and a beefier rim. Yeah, this one, oh yeah. It almost feels like the blade wants to wedge itself underneath that lip and get stuck. So that makes me feel pretty good about the design. What am I not so crazy about? Well, let's call it quality control, which is also part of design. If you look at the back of this one, it is bare steel. If you look at the back of this one, you can see inside the boss there's some black paint. Now this black paint was all over the back of it, but when I got it, I'll post a picture, it's flaking off all over the place. It looked really horrible. So one of the first things I did was took one of my scuff pads and just took it off. Left it inside the boss because it was pretty intact inside the boss. But yeah, that was kind of my first indication of a quality control issue. Now, get dressed for battle bucklers. People have obviously noted the grips are not, shall we say, very historic. It's a piece of metal tubing that's been folded and riveted in place. Now, the rivets are actually more solid than the rivets on these. I actually use the same rivets throughout for the boss as well as the grip. And on both of these, there are concerns that these might snap off with use. But I figure if they do, I'll just drill them out and put bolts in there, cold steel buckler style. Spoiler alert for future video. I promise I'll get to the cold steel buckler soon. But this is actually, as I mentioned in the video on this buckler, pretty comfortable. No hot spots. Feels really good in my hand. This one, well, probably what you're going to get more commonly buying a buckler today. Metal bar bent over, riveted in place, and then wooden scales riveted down, pinned down to either side. When this came to me, it was really ridiculously rough. The scales were on crooked, and there were sharp edges and splinters. So one of the first things I did was got out a file and some sandpaper, and I rounded it off. I still left plenty of texture to keep it grippy, but yeah, that was a quality control issue. Wasn't super impressed, but an easy fix. It didn't take me all that long to tune it up and make it feel good, look better. Now, one of the biggest differences, though, in the grips is if you look at it this way, and I don't know what exactly to call this. I'm going to call it the height of the grip to the boss. Now, this is not something that you see listed on the specs on the website when you're buying the thing. So you really don't know what you're getting into. Now, more historic boss grip shields might just have basically the handle as a stick that's riveted to the back of it. And that makes the handle then very, very close to the boss. Now, on this one, the handle's pretty close to the boss. You can actually see when I grip it, my knuckles are inside the boss. Now, this has a profound effect on balance. My hand is really close to the mass of this thing, so it's really easy for me to hold it steady. I can still roll it and shift positions from side to side. That's not a big deal, but it doesn't take a lot of effort in my grip to keep this thing held still. Versus this one, with the grip significantly further. Yeah, my hand isn't anywhere, if you see that, my hand isn't anywhere close to the boss when I'm gripping it. There's quite a bit of clearance there. That makes it really hard to hold it steady, but makes it really want to move. I have to put a lot more force in my grip to keep it still and in a particular position. But it wants to roll. So when it comes to rolling it around my sword hand as I move it, it's quick. Yeah, that's effortless. It actually reminds me a lot of the training I did with Tonfa. If you're familiar with that, it's kind of similar that way. But yeah, definite differences in balance. So, you know, your preferences and how you use a buckler, it might definitely affect what you want on the back of it. But like I said, the websites where you buy these don't specify. Maybe you can tell by the pictures, but I wasn't quite ready for that. However, I like it. They are very, very different implements. I like both extremes. Now, I've been training, as I mentioned briefly, actually trying to learn how to use an arming sword properly based on the classic manuals, which requires, yeah, that you keep the buckler protecting your sword hand in most cases, depending on where you're at. And yeah, you need to roll it around, right? You need to keep it wherever the lines are. And this will do that, but the weight does make it makes it quite a workout to keep it out here. But I think it's a worthwhile workout. Now, I've also been training the Bolognese styles, which include side sword and buckler. Now, I've got more hand protection here, so I don't need to have my buckler on top of my sword hand the whole time. And that gives some definitely different tactics. Shapes, for lack of a better word. Yeah, both very interesting. Now, you may have noticed I haven't been putting up very many videos lately. Nothing bad has happened, don't worry about that. There's two reasons for that. One reason is I've really been focusing my time on trying to finish a novel that has been sitting incomplete on my hard drive for a long time. So you might hear some more news about that. Also, I have been diving hard into the manuals and watching the videos and training, you know, finding my comfort zones, learning new things constantly. But in HEMA, I still consider myself a rank amateur. So I just don't feel like I have anything good enough to put on video for you guys. Now, this is definitely being informed by my history with Chinese and Japanese swordsmanship, and it is informing those styles. I am, well, basically learning a lot more about Japanese and Chinese swordsmanship from my study of HEMA. So I do intend to do that series on comparison. Also, I'll probably do kind of my own impressions, because when it comes to Japanese and Chinese swordsmanship, there are applications of double weapons. Now, have I discovered the difference between having a short sword or a dagger or a buckler in my hand? Well, absolutely, but I'm not quite ready to present my findings yet. The Japanese are not terribly famous for using shields. They did. The Chinese swordsmen did. You just don't see the practice very often anymore. And I think, well, maybe this could revive it for me a little bit. Like I said, it's giving me a much deeper understanding of, well, my other sword studies and all my other martial arts practices in general. So I considered it all worthwhile. All right. I do have a couple of other bucklers to show you. I'll get to those videos as quick as I can. Until then, if you have any questions about this one or that one, I'd be happy to try to answer them. Or you want to tell me about a buckler that you have that you like or don't like, we can get that discussion going as usual. But until next time, thanks for watching, following, subscribing, sharing, commenting. And I hope to see you back for, well, what else did Mike buy in the way of bucklers?